Welcome to Deep Dive, the Novel After Show. This is the podcast where we uncover the hidden layers, unravel the twists, and explore the worlds within words of the novels of, well, me, J. Kevin Tomlinson. Whether you've just finished the book or you're curious about what's inside, spoilers and all, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
All right, let's dive into this, The Devil's Interval. Looks like we've got excerpts from a thriller novel here. A pretty interesting mix of stuff: sound technology, secret societies, even mind control.
Yeah, I thought the same thing when I first saw it. What really grabbed me is how the novel takes real-world science, the tritone cochlear implants, even the theremin, and sort of weaves it into this world of suspense and conspiracy.
It's a cool combination, for sure. And right at the center of it all is Ashton Mink, right? Retired rock star turned philanthropist. That's not something you see every day.
No, not at all. What I found interesting was his motivation for this whole philanthropy thing. It seems like it's not just his own hearing loss that's driving him, but also this need to, create a positive legacy or something. Makes you wonder if it's pure altruism or, well, is there maybe something more there?
Yeah, could be. It's like the author's trying to make him a really complex character right from the beginning. And then there's the whole Sound Lab setup, AMSL, this hybrid cherry model is interesting, balancing profit with humanitarian goals.
Yeah, it's smart, actually. It kind of reflects what a lot of organizations struggle with in the real world, how to keep innovative research going while still making a positive impact. It's a tough balance to strike.
For sure. Speaking of innovation, let's talk about this devil's interval technology. You mentioned the tritone earlier, that musical interval that's supposed to be like unsettling. How does the author tie that into the technology and its effects on the brain?
Well, the book explains that the tritone's dissonance comes from its specific frequency ratio, right? So the author uses that idea to suggest that some sound frequencies can influence brain activity, even if you can't consciously hear them.
So like a dog whistle, but way more complicated.
Exactly. It's not just transmitting sound. It's about manipulating specific frequencies to get a specific effect. It's kind of creepy when you think about it.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's where the ethical stuff starts to come up, right? It goes from this amazing hearing aid technology to something much darker. The novel says that the devil's interval can do a lot more than transmit sound. Like, it can implant suggestions, memories, even commands.
We're talking mind control, basically.
Yeah, definitely sounds like a recipe for trouble.
Yeah.
And that's when the murder mystery comes in, right? Ashton Mink turns up dead, and there's this message that mentions the devil's interval.
Classic thriller stuff, but it works.
Totally. And that murder mystery adds this whole other layer to the ethical dilemma, right? It's not just a theoretical debate about misusing technology anymore. It's like a race against time to stop someone from using it for bad stuff.
For sure. You also pointed out the hidden chamber they find in Mink's apartment. With all that old technology, the theremin included. I have to admit, that caught my eye too. Why is the theremin so important?
Yeah, it's a weird detail for sure.
I think it does a few things. First, it adds this layer of mystery, like a historical element to the story. The theremin, with its strange sounds and how you play it, it just feels kind of otherworldly,
Like the author's hinting that people have been messing with sound for a long time, maybe centuries.
Exactly. And second, the theremin kind of foreshadows how sound can be both beautiful and unsettling. It can make these really ethereal melodies, but it can also create this feeling of unease and suspense. It's like a reflection of the devil's interval technology itself.
That's a really good point. So we've got this complex character, Ashton Mink, driven by this desire to leave a legacy, and then this groundbreaking technology that could be used for good or evil, and then on top of all that, a murder mystery that kicks off a high-stakes investigation. Where do we go from here?
Well, the story shifts focus to Dr. Simon Patel, the lead researcher on the Devil's Interval project. He vanishes soon after Mink's death, making him a prime suspect. But is he actually the one behind it all, or is he being used by someone else?
It's like classic thriller stuff again, right? You don't know who to trust or what their real motivations are. I'm also curious about how the investigation unfolds. Does it stay focused on the science world, or does it expand into other areas, like those secret societies we talked about earlier?
That's what makes the book so good. It mixes science fiction, mystery, even historical conspiracy stuff. The investigation turns into this global chase with secret tunnels, hidden groups trying to control this powerful technology, the whole 9 yards.
Sounds wild. But before we get too deep into all the action, let's think about the implications of this tech for a minute. If you can actually control minds with sound, what does that say about how vulnerable we are as people?
It's pretty scary when you think about it. The book really makes you face this idea that your thoughts and actions might not be entirely your own. It raises questions about free will, manipulation, and where the ethical lines are when it comes to scientific progress.
It definitely makes you think about the power of sound in a new way. We usually take it for granted, but this book shows how it can be used to heal and to harm. I'm really interested to see how the author explores those themes as the story goes on.
Me too. And it's worth remembering that even though this is fiction, the questions it raises about technology and how it could be misused are very real things we're dealing with in the world today.
Absolutely. This deep dive is turning out to be more than just a summary of a thriller. It's making us think critically about the world and the choices we make, both individually and as a society. But for now, let's get back to the story. You mentioned a chase, secret tunnels. Sounds like things are about to get interesting. So what happens next in the investigation?
The trail leads to London, where they find this secret tunnel system under an apartment building. There's a shootout in a hidden lab. Looks like a fight for control over the Devil's Interval tech. It's a fast-paced part of the story, and it definitely raises the stakes.
A shootout in a secret lab? That's some serious spy movie stuff right there. I wonder how this London part connects to the rest of it. Is that where they finally find Dr. Patel?
Eventually they do find him, yeah. But even then, it's not clear what his deal is. He says he's being forced to help the real mastermind. But who knows if he's telling the truth or just trying to save himself.
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Everyone in this story seems to have secrets. It's hard to tell who to believe. Speaking of secrets, you mentioned the investigators finding something interesting in Patel's lab in London, right? What's going on there?
They find out that he's been trying to recreate the missing data for the Devil's Interval. It seems like someone else is after the technology too, and they might have plans that are a lot worse than what Patel had in mind.
So it's not just about stealing the technology, it's about figuring out how to fully exploit it, how to use it for control. That's pretty disturbing. It brings us back to that central question. Who's really behind all this? Do we have any clues yet?
There are a few possibilities. There's Dr. Lonnie Briscoe, Patel's old research partner who died under mysterious circumstances. And then there are the AMSL executives, Ross Miller and Garrett Chandler. They both had access to sensitive information. It's a tangled mess, and the investigation keeps hitting dead ends and unexpected twists.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface of this whole conspiracy. Maybe before we get into all the twists and turns, we should talk about the bigger picture for a bit. The author is definitely using this thriller to explore some deeper stuff about power, control, and the ethics of science, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. The Devil's Interval itself is a powerful metaphor for how technology can be both good and bad. It has the potential to make lives better, but it can also be used to manipulate and control people. That tension is at the core of the book, and it's something we need to be aware of as we keep pushing the boundaries of what science can do.
You're right. It's like a cautionary tale disguised as a page-turner. It reminds us that even the best intentions can lead to unintended consequences. But for now, I'm dying to know what happens next in this web of mystery and intrigue. So we're left with a ton of unanswered questions, and the investigation's headed to London. It seems like getting to the bottom of this Devil's Interval thing is a real challenge.
Yeah, it's not a simple story. As the investigators dig deeper into AMSL, trying to find out where the security breach happened, they start focusing on Dr. Bristol. You mentioned that they think she might have kept a secret log of Patel's work.
Right, and it seems like someone else might have gotten hold of it. It makes you wonder about Dr. Bristol. Was there something more to her than we thought?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. While they're trying to piece together Dr. Bristol's past, Dr. Cotler gets kidnapped. And that really throws a wrench in the whole investigation.
Kidnapped? Wow, things are getting serious. What happened to Dr. Cotler? Did they find out who took him?
Okay, so this is where the author throws us a curveball. Cotler's eventually released, unharmed, and he says his kidnapper was Gail McCarthy.
Wait, Gail McCarthy, the woman who vanished after that Atlantis case? I thought she was gone for good.
So did everyone else. Her showing up again just adds another layer to this whole conspiracy. It seems like she's tied to the group that wants the Devil's Interval technology, and it makes you think this is a much bigger operation than we initially thought.
This is getting more and more complicated. We've got a dead rock star, a missing scientist, a secret society, a mysterious woman from another case, and now a kidnapping on top of it all. How does it all connect?
Remember that orange binder Cotler found in the abandoned warehouse? The one with Dr. Bristol's notes on the devil's interval.
Yeah, the one with all their research.
Right. Well, there was a pretty shocking revelation in there. She'd figured out the missing piece that would make the technology fully functional.
You mean she was closer to perfecting the mind control part of it than even Dr. Patel? That's scary. What was she planning to do with it?
The novel suggests she might have been using it to manipulate people even before she supposedly died. Remember those weird encounters with people who seemed brainwashed?
Yeah, the ones that seemed a little off.
Exactly. It seems that those weren't just random events.
Now that you mention it, those incidents were strange. The grocery store clerk, the couple at the diner. It makes sense now. But if Bristol was behind it all, who kidnapped her? And why let Dr. Chandler go?
The answer to that lies in what happened after Chandler was released. They were willing to trade him for the missing piece of research, the thing Bristol couldn't find.
So someone else wants the technology, but they're willing to negotiate. Maybe they're not as ruthless as Dr. Bristol was, or maybe it's all part of a much bigger plan.
Remember those hints about the voice behind the modulated speaker? The one we couldn't quite identify? Well, during the exchange, Dr. Chandler comes face to face with his kidnapper, and it changes everything.
Okay, now I have to know. Who was it?
It was Garrett Chandler, the COO of AMSL. And here's the real shocker. The novel reveals that Chandler is transgender, living a double life, and has been secretly planning to use the devil's interval for his own agenda.
Whoa, I did not see that coming. But why go through all that trouble? What's his goal?
The novel does a good job of explaining his motivations. On the one hand, he wants power and control. He's angry at the people he feels have oppressed him. But on the other hand, he actually believes he's fighting for a cause, that he can use this technology to force society to change.
Classic case of good intentions gone bad, I guess. But even if he thinks he's doing the right thing, he still kidnapped Dr. Chandler and threatened his life. The ends don't justify the means, even if you think you're working for the greater good. What happens when they find out about Chandler's plan? Does he get away with it?
That's the question that leads us into the final part of this thriller. Finding out who Chandler really is and what he wants sets off a chain reaction that ends in a huge confrontation where everything's on the line.
It's crazy how the author kept Chandler's identity hidden for so long. Looking back, there were hints, but they were so subtle. It makes you think, do we miss those signs of manipulation in our own lives?
It's a disturbing thought for sure. The book definitely makes you wonder who you can trust and how easily our perceptions can be messed with, especially when someone's using advanced technology for their own gain. How does Chandler react when his facade is shattered?
Well, he doesn't go down without a fight. You mentioned that he takes things to extremes, even taking Ross Miller hostage on the roof of the AMSL building.
Yeah, and remember, he's already put those devil's interval devices on himself and Miller, so it's a double threat. Not only is Miller's life at risk, but Chandler could also activate those mind control things remotely at any time. It's a really tense situation with some potentially awful consequences.
So even if they catch him, he could still set off those devices and cause chaos. It's like he's got them trapped. How do you even deal with something like that?
There's a lot of tension as the police and FBI try to figure out how to handle it. It's a race against time, trying to disarm Chandler and save Miller before he does anything drastic. But what makes it even scarier is that Chandler's already been using the technology on other people, turning them into his pawns without them even knowing.
That's terrifying. The idea that anyone could be under the influence of this technology without realizing it. It's like a dystopian nightmare come true. It makes you question free will and how technology can take away our sense of self.
You're hitting on one of the most disturbing parts of the book. It makes you face the possibility that your thoughts, actions, even how you see the world, can be manipulated without you ever knowing. It's a cautionary tale about how powerful technology can be and how important it is to be aware in a world that's increasingly shaped by it.
Let's get back to the crisis, though. Chandler's on the rooftop, threatening to jump with Miller and potentially unleash this mind control tech on everyone. What a mess. How do they break the stalemate and stop a disaster from happening?
This is where Dr. Patel's knowledge comes in. Despite his questionable choices earlier, he steps up and uses his understanding of sound frequencies to create a countermeasure. It's like a sonic weapon designed to disrupt the devil's interval signal.
So they're using sound to fight sound. It's interesting how the author uses that idea to show the two sides of technology. Its potential for both good and bad. Even when things look dark, there's still hope. There's always a chance for innovation to be used for the right reasons.
Absolutely. It shows human ingenuity, our ability to find solutions even in the worst situations. But even with this breakthrough, the danger isn't over. Chandler tries to get away, leading to a wild chase through the city.
It seems like this story is full of twists and turns right to the very end. Does he escape?
They eventually corner him in an abandoned warehouse, and he has a final confrontation with Dr. Chandler. It's a tense and emotional encounter. Both men are forced to face the consequences of what they've done.
It sounds like the showdown that's been building the whole time. What happens in that last confrontation?
It's a battle of wits and willpower. Chandler uses what he knows about Chandler and the technology to gain an advantage. In the end, Chandler is badly hurt and taken into custody. Justice is served, but the novel doesn't give us a simple resolution.
It's a good reminder that even when a crisis is avoided, the effects of manipulation and the risk of misuse remain. What about the technology? Is it destroyed, or could it still fall into the wrong hands?
That's the question the book leaves us with. The immediate danger is gone, but the knowledge of the devil's interval is still out there. It's a thought-provoking ending that makes us think about the long-term impact of scientific advances and the ethical responsibilities that come with them.
This deep dive has taken us on quite a ride. We started with what seemed like a simple thriller, but we ended up exploring some really deep questions about technology, power, and what it means to be human. It reminds us that even in fiction, we can find insights and perspectives that challenge us and make us think differently about the world.
I agree. The Devil's Interval is a great example of how stories can shed light on complex issues and get people talking. It leaves you with a feeling of unease, but also a renewed sense of your own power and the importance of protecting your freedom of thought in a world that's becoming more and more complex and technologically driven.
Well said. This deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about. And to everyone listening, we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. Think about the role of technology in your life and how you can stay informed and aware in a world where manipulation can be as subtle as a sound wave. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the Devil's Interval.
Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive, the Novel After Show. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with your fellow book lovers and leave us a review. And visit kevintomlinson.com/books to dive into your next adventure.